Marcus, can you help me here? I'm saying Santa Barbara. Is that wrong? They're making fun of me with how I'm pronouncing Santa Barbara.
Said it right this time.
He said it right this time.
The trap.
Yeah.
No.
Earlier he called it Santa Baba.
No, I didn't. That's ridiculous. Marcus Elliott, the P3 founder, director, P3 Peak Performance Project, based in Santa Barbara, California. He joins us. Thank you so much for hopping on, Marcus. This is your second time through Basketball Illuminati. I don't know why I'm all tripped up. Marcus, thanks for coming back on with us.
Good to be here, man. Thanks for all you guys taking your time.
So we wanted to have you on to talk about this new initiative, this news story that the NBA has launched a league-wide biomechanics program, and it's got P3's hands written all over it. You're being brought in as a consultant to the program, and it feels like this is kind of the one of the central issues of the NBA.
Tom, this is a massive news story that went by like as a blip. A sports business journal kind of just little article, but it really wasn't covered. But I think this is as big, if not a bigger deal than the optical tracking being installed in every arena.
If you're equating it to the optical tracking, I'm going to say we would have fallen really short. You know, if you end up being right about that, then I think that this league-wide biomechanics initiative would have fallen way short of its potential. Like it should have a lot bigger impact than getting a little bit more insight into defensive closeouts. I mean, what is the problem with the NBA right now that comes up over and over is so many games, hard for guys to play hard every night, like they're being asked to do, and survive, right? And it's one of the reasons I'm so interested in the NBA. I think you guys know it, or at least I've told Tom at some point. But I started in the NFL, and then we worked in Major League Baseball. Now put a lot of our energy into basketball. But one of the reasons I'm most interested in it is that the load that these guys are being expected to endure is very close to what the human body can endure. And so when they have some mechanical issues, when they have some asymmetries, when they have compensation patterns, when they have things that we can identify, they usually don't survive. And so what are you going to do about that? You know, everyone says you can play less games. At least we hear that as a regular buzz, but it doesn't seem like they're playing less games. And so we got to be better at identifying when these systems are a little bit out of balance, when they're a little bit out of whack. And so to your point, I mean, if this ends up being as valuable as a little more insight on a player's gravity or on his ability to close out threes, then we would have failed, because it should be way more important than that. And I think you guys know this, but we've been assessing players at the NBA Combine for 10 years now, and this program was sort of born out. I mean, more than a little bit, it was born out of the NBA sitting alongside us while they let us do our thing there, and us making predictions about things that were going to happen. And then together we get to sit back and see how much of those things happen. And I know that the league officials were hoping that the teams in the league would act on this more granular data and this more granular player assessment on their own a little more aggressively. And at some point they said, look, there's too much value here. We need to come in and help these teams do this. And so that's where that announcement came from.
Yeah. And the 4 companies that won the league's RFP, basically they went out and said, this is what we want to do. And these 4 companies are going to be going along in this initiative: Qualisys, Thea Markerless, Burtech, Breakaway Data. And you guys are going to help run this program where it's like you're all coming together with this common cause of trying to understand the way that players move, the way their biomechanics move in space, their loads, the force plates, all of it. We want a more complete picture of not just how they are, but how to predict what they will be, and kind of track that longitudinally. And there's 4 teams that are going to be part of this pilot program. The Cavs, Jazz, Pacers, and Suns are going to have these like biomechanics labs in their practice facilities to help gather some of this information. Players, I think, Marcus, you were one of the first people to to really push this is that the players need this data. The players want to be educated. And when they switch teams, it shouldn't be that like if a team gets traded from team A to team B or team A has all the information, then when that player goes to team B, suddenly they don't have that information that team A collected. And it seems backwards that the players should be having all of this knowledge at their disposal to make better decisions about their careers.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, our position, traditionally we operate as if we only work for the players. That is it. Like, we're going to get information about a player's body, and we have to figure out how to make that player's life better. That's been our moral call. We repeat that all the time in our facility. When you get into these team initiatives, these league-wide initiatives, it gets a little more complicated. Because it's the owners of the teams that are paying for this. The league is paying for this. But I have some confidence that if it's managed right, this is one of those spaces where getting better, getting more insight, having better outcomes benefits everyone. So the way that it's managed will largely determine how successful it is. I'm gonna back up a step too, Tom. I mean, the reason we're doing this is because there's a huge value in understanding granular athlete movement, how athletes land, what kind of rotation they have across their foot when they're going into a second jump, etc. Understanding how athletes move allows us to predict what they're going to be good at, what they're going to be bad at, and where they're at risk for injury. There's a strong relationship between how you move and what happens to you. And this is what we've been exposing and operating on for a couple of decades now. And like I said, the league is able to sit next to us in this combine initiative. And they also see that, I think we have almost 70% of the current players have been through one of our facilities. 69% of current NBA players, rostered players, have been through a P3 facility and been assessed. And so they see that the players are interested, that players are showing up at P3 and paying, thousands of dollars to get assessed, to get a program, figuring out how to get to Santa Barbara, or whatever you call it, Tom, however you pronounce it. And now that same information should be available inside the four walls of their facility. Like, if this doesn't go great, then, we screwed up. The league screwed up. We as a partner screwed up. Somewhere along the line, we screwed up, because there's a strong relationship between how you move and what happens to you. And if we can bring that information to bear on how we program for players, how we build players, how we set a roadmap for a player to have a 15-year career, if we can't make the world better with that information when it's available to every one of these players and teams, then we really messed up. It is a big initiative, though. Like, nothing like this has ever happened in pro sports. Not in the EPL, not in the NFL. Nobody's really taken on anything close to this from a sports science initiative standpoint. So I applaud the NBA for being willing to innovate and take a big swing.
Marcus, you said earlier that you hope that I'm right when I say this is a bigger thing, but you feel like we're actually falling short, at least in the current incarnation. What would hit the mark look like to you, and how are they falling short of hitting that mark?
So, I mean, the way we think about this sport is that, even over the time that we've been really involved in the NBA, which is the last 15 years, these athlete systems have changed markedly. Like, these athletes are way faster. They're way more ballistic than they were 15 years ago. Our NBA bigs do so many things that our NBA bigs from 15 years ago couldn't do. These systems that are coming into this league are incredibly explosive, incredibly ballistic, super high force, big acceleration systems. And the game is being played in this open space now. The demands on the body is so hard from these Ferraris that come into the league. So that's really the challenge. That's how the game has shifted. That's what the guys from the 90s don't get. The players from the 90s. Where has it fallen short? I think, like, when we got involved in the NBA, all pro sports, honestly, they weren't that interested in player development. They weren't that interested in strength and conditioning. There's some of it that goes on, but the guys that run those programs rarely sit at the main table. They're not in there having discussions with the GM on a regular basis. They were, I don't want to say they were afterthoughts. There were certainly some really good people applying their trade, but the teams just didn't value it that much. All these executives, they're not interested in like strength and conditioning or performance. I mean, they're interested in basketball or football. That's how they got into this stuff. And so this is a little bit off on the side. It's kind of out in the garage. And so in the beginning, most of these, like when I started in pro sports, there wasn't a job in pro sports that would allow me to pay off my medical school education. Nobody could give me a job in the space that I was working in that would allow me to support myself. Nowhere in pro sports.
Yeah.
So these guys weren't very valued. There wasn't a lot of emphasis on player protection, player development, player strength. And then the league in the NBA, they started saying, well, this stuff is important. We got a lot of players getting hurt. We're paying these players a lot of money. We should invest more there. So the staff started getting big. The salary started going up, but that doesn't entirely solve the problem.
Marcus, we just watched a GM for the Dallas Mavericks say, hey, we weren't so sure about the Supermax, or at least, I don't know if he said it this way, but Luka Doncic, 25 years old, 5-time All-NBA. There's only 3 players in NBA history who have done that. And they were worried maybe potentially that $350 million was going to be too much money for that, given some things. And you read between the lines, and they weren't totally sure that Luka Doncic was going to be healthy enough, that he wasn't serious about his body, etc., whatever you want to read into it. But there were concerns about giving this guy the Supermax contract, which, as I've written, he is the most qualified guy ever to have the Supermax extension on the table. There's no other player who's been more qualified for it than Luka Doncic in the Supermax era. And yet the fans are all wondering, like, wait, is Luka Doncic's body going to hold up? It doesn't seem like it. Maybe Nico Harrison's right. And I keep thinking, we don't know. Like, there's so much uncertainty that we could possibly entertain the idea that maybe Luka Doncic at 25 years old could be a bad investment to give him the Supermax contract. And it just reminds me that we are so early on understanding these bodies if we're not able to ascertain whether Luka Doncic is worth the Supermax contract.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is super germane. It also gets to the point I had earlier about how this type of information should make for a better world for everyone. If Luka knows what his risk factors are, he knows where his mechanical issues are, where his mechanical pathologies are, and he's working against those. I have 100% confidence that he has a better chance of staying whole. I also can envision a world where those decisions are being made because people have better information about their players and they know that they're not going to stay healthy. Meaning the information in the players' hands through the team can help the player stay healthy. But sometimes we assess athletes right after they sign big contracts and we say, wow, that was a wasted $80 million. Or there's no way they're going to get their $160 million out of this guy. He's a shell of what he was when we assessed him 3 years ago. So those are the slippery slopes, of working inside an organization. But I have a lot of confidence that having better information on the table is going to help us take better care of these $350 million, maybe $350 million players. We're headed towards $500 million contracts, right?
Just big money, man.
Yeah. Huge money. Huge money. So what goes into these labs that they're going to be creating, these 4 test labs with those 4 teams that Tom mentioned, and then eventually expanding to entire league? What actually goes in and what are we measuring? Yeah.
So, I mean, in the last CBA, it was negotiated because they were anticipating this activation that the players would be mandated to assess 4 times a year, have these granular biomechanical assessments that P3 has been doing for 15 years. So it's already written in the CBA that the players are mandated to do the assessments. And as Tom said, they've already installed labs in 4 different teams, biomechanics labs. The other groups that are represented on there, Tom, as being part of this initiative, they're providing hardware, or they're providing the reports or the processing, but not really where the rubber meets the road. They're more on the back end side. Like Qualisys connects motion capture systems, camera systems, and Thea does processing, and the other group, Breakaway, will generate the reports to do the software side. So these labs have gone in 4 facilities, and now they're rolling out in all the other facilities. The intention is to have 30 labs across 30 teams by this next September, by the start of this next year. So training camp, we're able to get these athletes in, run them through an assessment battery, and collect all this information about how their bodies move, how their bodies work. And to get a little more granular, there's going to be a league-wide initiative with certain tests being run, certain assessment battery. And then there's going to be a P3 assessment that's also offered to the teams. That the teams can license from P3. And starting off in the league-wide initiative, there's no data in the system. So we need to get data before we can get to the insights. So we start off with no data or data context. It'll be a very simple context. We assess your starting point guard, and we can compare him to the first assessment we've done on 29 other starting point guards. But it takes a while before this data is connected to things that really matter.
Right.
You need a lot of data, and you need some historical reference before you can start connecting it with injuries, before you can connect it to performance advantages. And so it will start off with a small amount of value to the teams, and that value will grow. As long as the program is run well, the value will grow every year. Fortunately, with the P3 reports being generated alongside the league-wide initiative, they're going to have our historical data, of 1,200 NBA athletes over the last 14 years or so. And all of our insights are already baked in. You're worried about ankle injuries in your perimeter players. These are the movement patterns that are associated with ankle injuries. And these are the 2 guys, of all your 3D players, these are the 2 guys that have the highest risk of ankle injury because of this metric and this metric. And so you can action against it. So if you're collecting all this information, really granular information on how these bodies work when they land, when they jump, when they cut, and you're indexing that against things that matter, against being an elite perimeter defender or risk of traumatic knee injury, you're essentially exposing the physics of the sport and connecting it to things that matter as a basketball player or as an organization. And then you action those signals before you have bad outcomes, before the guy that you're trying to get to be your shutdown perimeter defender gets out there and gets toasted in space. You should know that he doesn't have the physics to be a perimeter defender. So that's a reality. We were talking about Luke a minute ago. You got to be a dog to defend, but there is physics that are going to govern whether or not that being a dog is actually going to be effective. That's just the truth.
When we get those measurements and we get those readings, I have to imagine that for some portion of the population that is adjustable, meaning physically this guy doesn't have any of the characteristics, but there are things that he could do, range of motion and other types of specific kind of targeted trainings that we can do that can get him to that place.
Yes. So you're asking the right questions. It's kind of impressive if you can collect information and predict who's going to have bad outcomes, but that's not very satisfying. It's much more satisfying to collect information, be able to predict outcomes, and then change those outcomes. And so, the way we think about this is every system in the body is plastic. Everything can be changed. Some of those things change very, very slowly. And when it comes to things like acceleration potential, everyone has predetermined ceilings. It's not a limitless pursuit that you can keep pushing the ceiling up and up and up. So some of these things can be changed a whole lot. Some of them can be changed a little. Some of them change very quickly. Some of them change very slowly. But without question, to have these metrics, these signals that are important for being healthy or for being an elite player in some environment on the floor, makes for a better league. At least having this information available makes for a better league.
Yeah, Marcus, you've been collecting this data at the Combine since 2014 in conjunction with the NBA, going to Chicago and setting up these labs and assessing some of these players. What have we learned?
I think the most important bottom line is the one I led with, and that's that how these athletes move today has significant impact on what happens to them tomorrow. Whether their risk of injury, their ability to play in different areas, their ability to stay in the league for a long time. You've seen some of our clustering, right? I mean, first off, like it's amazing to me that we have data on 70% of the current players. You know, like we've taken us in one sport, and we work in all these sports, but in this sport, over 2/3 of the best players in the league have come to us and let us assess them to try to make their lives better. Like that's pretty amazing. And so, like, I'm so thankful for that, and I feel like we've done a good job of maintaining that trust. You know, I don't feel like we've never have we assessed a player and not, and has it made his life worse? Let me say that. You know, almost always we'll get some insight that'll give them a chance to have a better outcome, and a lot of times it's been game changing. But never does it lead to a worse situation for them. You know, we've been very careful about how we manage that information and where it goes and how we represent it. And because of that, you know, we end up with 2/3 of the league. And I think that, you know, the proof and the value is that the league is going to take on this really big project. This is a hard project for a league to take on. You know, there's so many pitfalls here. There's so many ways this can go wrong. And they don't need to. The league's doing okay. You know, they got some pretty good TV deals going and stuff. But, you know, give them credit. They want to be proactive here. You know, they want to be better here. And by looking over our shoulder for a decade, they're like, it's time. We got to go do this. And so, you know, now we'll go get in at bat with it.
All right, Marcus, let's get into the fun part. You mentioned making predictions, having guys get assessed and then making predictions. The one that I guess our listeners would be most familiar with is the one that Tom referenced at the beginning, that Luka Doncic has elite level deceleration. Only James Harden was the only guy that came close as far as testing. So what are some other predictions that you made from testing someone and then you saw it bear out in action?
Oh man, there's so many. So on the positive side, I can tell you, like, we're getting ready to do NBA pre-draft here, you know, which is really a fun time of year for me, because we're going to see all these 19-year-old kids, and, you know, a couple 20, a couple 21-year-olds, but a lot of 19-year-old kids show up that are not much older than my son, who's a 17-year-old senior in high school, and they're getting ready to go try to be NBA players. And I mean, these are just kids, you know. And we're gonna see some guys that have a chance to make $1 billion or more in their careers, you know, from these kids. And every year from those draft classes, there's a couple guys. We always pick our sleepers. We always have a couple sleepers. They're guys that we think are under the radar for whatever reason, and our data loves them. And we're like, the physics on this guy are going to be overwhelming. Like, there's no way that his physics are going to lose, and people don't know that yet. One guy I'm enjoying watching right now is Jalen Williams.
I was just going to say, J-Dub. Yeah.
Did I talk about him to you, Tom, before the draft?
No.
Okay, I did to Henry, because Henry was out at the Combine. He wanted to know who
Henry
our
Abbott
favorite guy.
Hoop. Yep.
Yeah, who he wanted to know who our favorite under the radar guy was in that draft, and he was thought to be a late second round pick when we got him, and he had amazing metrics, amazing. He could do everything. He's a great decelerator, a great accelerator. He's an amazing lateral speed athlete, amazing vertically, incredible length, and just like a well-parented kid, like he's got great life skills, all those things. And we're like, this guy, how is he going to miss? So he was one of our most recent. I'll tell you what we should do. I'll tell you what we should do is we should do this in May.
Yeah.
And let's talk about a couple guys, because there's going to be a couple guys that people don't know are going to be elite NBA players.
What about Şengün? I went on Le Batard and I said Şengün, based on his production at the Turkish league at 18 years old, he should have been the number 1 overall pick in his class. And they were thinking I'm crazy. And I'm like, no, this kid, what he was doing at 17 years old, dominating the game against big men is crazy. And it's one of the top leagues in the world. And he was the MVP. And he fell to outside the lottery. And I think you guys have assessed him. And he looks like he's got what we would call a dad bod. He's not super cut. I wouldn't say he's got, Giannis level body fat, but he's going to be an all-star this year along with Jalen Williams. And it seems like he's another guy that is misunderstood in terms of the way he moves and how he leverages that to be a great basketball player. Is that another player?
Yeah. I mean, those guys, we just did a New York Times piece. Do you see that? The dad bod piece? No, you didn't read it. You have kids. You're busy with this work. But the article was, I think it was titled like "Dad Bods" in pro sports or something like that. And it was a great take on this thing that I told you guys earlier that I was really interested in. That's these second order performance metrics. I mean, the easiest thing to see in an athlete is how high does he jump and how fast does he run. But there's no relationship between jumping high, as measured at the NBA Combine, and having a productive NBA career. There's zero relationship. It's been investigated a bunch of times. A bunch of grad students have taken this thing on. It's just, there's no relationship, no correlation at all between jumping high and having a successful NBA career once you're at a certain level. Şengün, Şengün spent a full off season with us 2 years ago. He got more work in than anybody we had that off season. And I love this kid. I love him the first time we assessed him. He makes a case for these movers that we call kinematic movers. You may have heard me talk about it, Tom, yep. Possibly me. But when we take all the data that we collect on these players and we put it into a machine, we put it in a computer and have the computer do this machine learning exercise on the data, it clusters players based on all these small movements we collect into similarities. So it has all these little clusters placed all over the place. And people end up clustered that you would never think would be clustered together. And our favorite cluster is this cluster called kinematic movers. We call them kinematic movers because they're efficient movers, but they don't do anything really, really well. Nothing that would catch your eye and you say, oh my God, look at that system. That guy's going to be an NBA player. A lot of these guys go to small schools. A lot of them, are mid-second round picks or undrafted. And they have the highest win shares of any one of these clusters that the computer draws up. They're the most successful NBA players, and Şengün is one of these players. He can do anything we ask of him. You want him to slide left, slide right, rotate left, first jump, second jump. He jumps not high. He's not as bad as Jokic, who was our worst jumper we've ever assessed. But Jokic is the other guy of two bigs that we've assessed that are towards the kinematic movers. So they're usually small guys like CJ McCollum is a kinematic mover. Trae Young is a kinematic mover. The first time the young Luka is a kinematic mover. First time we assessed Luka, he's a kinematic mover. Or before he got in the NBA, he's a kinematic mover. We assessed him a few times before he got in the NBA. So Şengün is one of these guys. He can do anything we ask of him, but he doesn't do anything spectacularly well. We think of him as the Swiss Army knives of athletes. Yeah. They don't have any feature that is really overwhelmingly great, but they can do everything. And what I love is it points to the fact that if you have the right tool for the job the exact right tool for the job in every environment on an NBA court, you can be a really successful player. there's only a few athletes in our lifetimes that will be LeBron James or Anthony Edwards. You know, Anthony Edwards is off the charts, laterally, vertically, like one of the more ridiculous athletes we've ever assessed. Everybody can see that that's that freakishness, right? That's incredible system that he's got. But there's lots of really, really successful athletes that have so much less horsepower than he does, but they can do everything. They have all these different movement properties embedded and available. You know, it's like a 30 blade Swiss Army knife. You know, Anthony Edwards he doesn't have a single blade. You know, Zion might have a single blade, but Anthony Edwards only has a few blades. And they're great, all of them. But Şengün, Jokic, CJ McCollum, he's got the right blade for the right job. None of them are that big, not crazy sharp, but the right blade for the job.
Well, we got to do this again in May. We're going to take you up on that,
Yeah.
Marcus.
Let's do it. That's one of my, so there's no way that ends up being a bad thing for these guys that we call out. It can only be good. We've helped get a lot of guys drafted that I think weren't going to get drafted by doing the same thing. We don't do it in the media usually, but we can do it. You know, you guys are deep basketball people. So let's try that. Let's do it. It'll be a fun exercise, and I'll tell you exactly what it is about their systems and why they'll work. Okay. Sometimes we find guys that can be elite perimeter defenders in the NBA that have never defended in their lives because they're volume scorers in college. You know, they didn't need to be defenders, but they have the systems, and you would never know that they would have the system because you've never seen it, but we can see it. So those are some of my favorite IDs.
I can't wait.
Yes, I'm excited.
Systems.
Marcus Elliott, the kinematic mover of this podcast. Thank you so much for hopping on with us. We're going to do this again in a couple months, maybe even sooner. We love having you on always and appreciate you taking the time, Marcus.
You guys are solid. I appreciate you.